I decided to surprise my husband, but I ended up getting the biggest, most painful surprise of my life. Just imagine for a moment, if you can, what it's like to discover that the person you've put all your trust in, who swore to love you and be transparent, has hidden an entire life from you. A secret so deep, so well kept that when it was revealed, it destroyed every single pillar of everything you believed was real. That love, that sense of security, that future you were planning, it all crumbled in one brutal second. My name is Sarah. My life, until that day, was the perfect picture of a routine I loved. Predictable, comforting, exactly how I liked it. I adored the order of our days, the smell of fresh bread on Sundays, the classic books filling our shelves, especially our family Sundays, a sacred ritual of peace and togetherness. But ironically, it was that very routine, that predictability, that led me to a place I never imagined being. I was on my way to take a homemade pie to my husband's parents in a charming little rural town in Pennsylvania. The autumn road was beautiful. The day seemed perfectly designed, with golden leaves dancing in the wind, and I was smiling, happy. But what awaited me there in the serenity of that place was a personal hell I never imagined. You won't believe what I saw when I got to the house. You won't believe the scene that unfolded right before my eyes. Get ready, because this story goes far beyond a simple discovery. It's going to change the way you see the people around you and the very concept of truth. Stay with me, because this is a truth that needs to be told. The perfect life and the unexpected shadow. My life in Boston revolved around the comforting rhythm of academia, literary debates, and the unmistakable scent of classic books. I, Sarah, was a university literature professor, someone who loved order, routine, and the predictability each day brought. And David, my husband, was my safe harbor. He, a brilliant engineer, was my opposite in almost every way, focused on logic, numbers, precise calculations. But somehow we complemented each other perfectly. I admired him for his stability, his practical mind. He valued my passion, my ability to see the world through words. We thought we were an unbeatable duo, the couple who had everything under control. Our house was organized, our family dinners were filled with laughter, and I loved reading poetry to him before bed. To all appearances, it was a perfect life. Within this perfection, one ritual was sacred. Every Sunday, David would drive 2 hours to Harmony Creek, a small, charming rural town in Pennsylvania. He went to help his parents, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, with their property and, of course, to bring the preserves and fresh pies I lovingly prepared. It was a tradition we cherished, a link to simple living and his family's roots. I thought I knew him deeply, every detail, every habit, every thought. David was an open book to me. Or so I believed. But lately, a subtle shadow began to spread over our routine. David was quieter, his eyes lost somewhere distant out the window. I attributed it to work stress, a massive engineering project that seemed to consume him. I tried to be more attentive, to surround him with even more affection, to cook his favorite dishes. Yet a barely noticeable doubt began to whisper, "Am I missing something? Is there something more here that I'm not picking up on?" It was an uncomfortable feeling, a slight disharmony that I chose to ignore. I didn't know that this silence was the calm before the storm, and that I was about to discover a truth that would redefine everything. That Saturday morning, I woke up with a sudden, irresistible urge to create a surprise. One of those ideas that pops into your head like a sunbeam, chasing away any clouds. I wanted to surprise my in-laws, of course, but most of all, David. I wanted to bring the pies and preserves myself, without him expecting me. I wanted to see genuine joy plastered across his face when he unexpectedly found me in Harmony Creek. It was a simple, pure gesture, a desire to rekindle that spark amidst our routine. I longed to breathe the fresh Pennsylvania air, to feel the warmth of that home that was also a little bit mine. I packed a bag with my best homemade pies and preserves, chose some light, comfortable clothes, and grabbed the keys to our old Ford Explorer, a car with its own stories, one that had accompanied us on all our adventures. As I drove along the Massachusetts roads, the plan seemed so simple. Just show up, see the joy on their faces, share a tight hug. That warm feeling of making someone happy. I was about to discover that life has a cruel, unexpected way of surprising us back, of showing us that our plans don't always align with reality. The drive to Harmony Creek took about 2 hours. I put on my favorite playlist, humming along to the songs on the radio, imagining the scene, visualizing David's surprised smile. The autumn landscape was a spectacle in itself, the trees displaying a vibrant palette of colors, from red to gold. There was an almost palpable peace in the air, a serenity that, unbeknownst to me, foreshadowed the impending storm. Finally, I spotted the familiar sign for Harmony Creek. My heart began to pound, anticipation growing with each turn. Soon, I recognized my in-laws' wooden chalet, nestled among the trees. I pulled the car into the driveway, took a deep breath, ready for the surprise. And then, time seemed to freeze. There, in the yard, was David, and he wasn't alone. Beside him, an unknown woman was embracing him. Cuddled in her arms, a boy of about 5 years old slept peacefully. The interaction between them was intimate, filled with familial affection. David knelt down, kissed the woman's forehead, adjusted the blanket over the boy. His gestures were of pure love, a tenderness I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. In that instant, the ground simply vanished beneath my feet. This wasn't a casual encounter with a neighbor. This wasn't a longtime friend. It was a family. His other family. The world tilted, the air thinned. There was nothing left but the muffled sound of my own despair. In that instant, the only thing my mind could process was to run. I ran back to the car, my hands shaking so much I could barely get the key into the ignition. I started the engine, put it in gear, and just drove off, aimlessly, the golden autumn landscape now blurred by the tears clouding my vision. The crying was compulsive, visceral, a pain tearing at my chest. How could he? How could David, the man I loved, with whom I shared every part of my life, hide something like this? My entire life, it was a lie. That love I thought was so pure, the promises whispered in my ear, the plans we built for the future, everything crumbled in a second, turning to dust and ashes. And as the tears streamed down, the pain began to mix with something else, rage, a cold, sharp anger that started to burn in my stomach. Flashes of our wedding, our first date, the small signs that I and my naivety had ignored. David's frequent trips he'd justify as urgent projects, the subtle distance I'd attributed to stress. Everything brutally clicked into place now, forming a mosaic of deception. Had I been so blind? How did I miss the signs, the clues he might have left along the way? The pain was unbearable, but the rage gave me a dark energy. I drove for hours without a destination until the road ended in a small, solitary shoulder. I stopped the car and turned off the engine. The silence, once suffocating, now gave me space to think. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't run forever. I needed the truth, every detail, not just a frozen scene in my mind. As terrifying as it was, I needed to confront him. With hands still trembling, but with a new and dangerous determination in my eyes, I turned around. The conversation with David would be the hardest of my life. I knew the truth awaited me, back in Boston, but I didn't know that truth had a face and a name. Rage gave me strength, but the pain still tore at me. I knew I couldn't confront David immediately. An explosion would be inevitable, and I needed answers he might not want or be able to give me at that moment. I needed time, a plan. In the days following my discovery, instead of confronting him, I decided to go back to Harmony Creek. But not as the betrayed wife. I needed armor, an excuse. I concocted a silly but believable story. I was an anthropologist studying local rural architecture for a new research project. This armor would give me the chance to observe, to understand, to piece things together, and perhaps to grasp the why of it all.
I needed the truth in its purest form, not just his reaction. My heart pounded as I pulled my car onto the small dirt road leading to the chalet. As I approached the gate, I saw a woman in the yard, watering flowers. It was her, the same woman from the embrace. Her brown hair fell over her shoulders, and there was a serenity on her face, despite the visible weariness in her eyes. She didn't look like a movie villain, but an ordinary woman. With the firmest voice I could muster, I introduced myself. "Hello, I'm Audrey. I'm researching the buildings in the area." She smiled gently. "I'm Elena," she replied, her name. I had created a character to have a chance to meet her, and she opened her home to me. Upon entering, the scent of fresh bread mixed with the soft aroma of baby milk enveloped me. It was a home, a lived-in, welcoming home. And then I saw him, the boy. He was playing on the living room with building blocks, an innocent smile. "This is Daniel," Elena said, with a tenderness that pricked my chest. The scene was so domestic, so normal, that it shocked me even more. Elena wasn't the cold, calculating woman I had imagined in my rage. She was a mother. My throat dried, but I pushed the conversation into dangerous territory. "Your son is beautiful, Elena. He looks a lot like David, the man who delivers pies here on Sundays." Her face tightened slightly, and the truth began to unfold, not in a scream of confrontation, but in a low voice filled with profound sadness. Elena revealed that David was, in fact, Daniel's father. Their relationship had been a brief romance long before David met me. The child was born later, and David took responsibility for his paternity. Their relationship as a couple had ended a long time ago. He only came as a father. "He was afraid, Audrey," Elena continued, "afraid of losing the wife he loved, of hurting her. He's a good father, but he's a man afraid." The world stopped spinning. There was no hatred in her voice, only a melancholic resignation. David didn't love her anymore. He just couldn't abandon his son. My rage began to mix with something much more complex: comprehension. He wasn't a heartless monster, a cold traitor. He was a man lost in his own tangle of fears and responsibilities. Lying for years, it was cowardly, yes, but also a desperate attempt not to hurt anyone. Not me, not Elena, not even his own son. This new perspective was as overwhelming as the pain of the original betrayal. The drive back to Boston was a blur. Every mile on the road was a stab of pain and a storm of thoughts. The rage I felt for David had mingled with a strange compassion for Elena and an even greater confusion about the man I was married to. I knew the confrontation was inevitable, but what would I say? How would I even begin? When I walked into our house, David was there, sitting on the living room sofa, head down, body slumped. It looked like he knew. He slowly stood up when he saw me. My heart was in tatters, but my voice came out strangely firm. "I've been to Harmony Creek," I said, each word an effort. His face instantly went pale, the blood drained, and he fell back on the sofa. The truth was there, hanging in the air, heavy and undeniable. Then he confessed. Every word that came out of his mouth was a dagger piercing what remained of my illusion, but at the same time, there was a strange and painful liberation. He spoke about the brief romance before he met me, the shock of Daniel's birth, the paralyzing fear of abandoning his son, and above all, the dread of losing me, of hurting me. He was broken, destroyed by guilt and the weight of the secret. But the truth, raw and bare, was finally there between us. That night was an abyss. We lay in bed, separated by a distance that seemed greater than the ocean. I couldn't sleep. Every breath he took beside me was a reminder of the secret, of the life he'd hidden. Everything felt fake, unreal. My life had crumbled, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. I needed space, silence. I fled to a small country house I owned in rural Vermont, a refuge I'd always used for writing and thinking. There, in the solitude of the mountains, I reflected. He didn't cheat on me out of desire for another woman, but out of paternal duty and an overwhelming fear of hurting me and destroying the life we had built. Does that make the pain last? No. The pain of the lie and the breach of trust was still excruciating. But it changed the perspective. He wasn't a villain from a cheap story. He was a complex, imperfect man who made terrible decisions out of fear. What to do? Destroy everything we had built over the years? Or try to understand, perhaps forgive someday, and try to rebuild? My family, my love for David, the life we dreamed of, Were they worth fighting for? That question pounded endlessly in my mind. When I returned to Boston, a decision had been made, heavy and terrifying, but clear. David was waiting for me, looking even more dejected. I looked at him, took a deep breath, and said,
I know everything. I understand why. The surprise in his eyes was followed by a mix of relief and pain. I decided to stay. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten, or that I've forgiven. It means that, if you're willing, we're going to have to work hard, very hard, to rebuild trust, brick by brick. I wasn't forgiving the lie at that moment. I was choosing to fight for our history, for the chance of a true future. But for that, we needed a fresh start, together. The decision to stay with David, to fight for our story, was the first step on a journey I knew would be long and painful. But for that fight to be real, there had to be a transparency that had never existed. One afternoon, while we were having coffee, I looked at David, who still carried the weight of guilt in every gesture. Let's go to Harmony Creek, I suggested. He looked at me, surprised, his eyes widening. To see Elena and Daniel? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. Yes, I replied, with a firmness I didn't even know I possessed. It was the hardest step of all. I needed to see that child's face, my secret stepson, without the fog of shock or anger. I needed to accept the truth in its entirety, however painful it was. That child was living proof of a part of David's life I never knew, but he was also innocent, the result of David's choice. We arrived at Elena's house on a Sunday afternoon. I had prepared a bag with homemade pies and cookies for Elena and Daniel, a gesture that seemed crazy to the outside world, but for me, it was the embodiment of my choice. Elena greeted us at the gate with a gentle, surprising smile. And then, Daniel, a boy with curious eyes and unruly hair, appeared in the doorway. Sasha, as she affectionately called him. He hid a little behind his mother, then approached, looked at me with innocent curiosity, and smiled. In that moment, I knew I was doing the right thing. There was no anger in his eyes, just pure curiosity and a child's joy. And, in that instant, something in me calmed down. We sat at the table in the small kitchen, drinking tea, talking about trivialities. We spoke about the weather, Daniel's school, Elena's garden. It was a painful, strange conversation, full of silences laden with meaning. But, strangely, it was real. And, for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were building something new, something honest. It wasn't the family I had idealized, nor the one I thought I had. It was a family with its own complex rules, a mosaic of hearts that were broken and, little by little, being mended. The price of truth was the deepest pain, but the reward, however difficult to accept, was the possibility of a future built on the pillars of honesty, however imperfect it might be.
Life, as Sarah discovered, isn't always predictable. Sometimes the deepest love, the one we think we know inside and out, can hide the most profound and painful secrets. But the truth, no matter how much it hurts, no matter how much it pulls the rug out from under you, is the only path to true freedom and the possibility of a love that's even greater, more honest, more resilient. It was a journey of excruciating pain, overwhelming rage, and a shock that redefined everything. But it was also a journey of understanding, of a forgiveness that didn't happen overnight, and, ultimately, of an acceptance that opened the doors to a new way of loving and living. What about you? What would you do if you were in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to know how this story resonated with you and what choices you'd make when faced with such a devastating secret. If this story moved you, made you think, and touched you deeply in some way, give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more real stories that will make you feel, reflect, and grow. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos where we'll continue to explore life's most complex real-life dilemmas and how ordinary people cope with the most shocking surprises. Don't miss out.